Right now, a tiny island sitting at the entrance to the Strait of Hormuz, an island so small most of the world had never heard of it before this week, has become the newest and most significant flashpoint in this entire war. Greater Tunb Island, Iran believed its location, its fortifications, and its decades of military entrenchment made it a secure, untouchable stronghold controlling one of the most important shipping lanes on the planet. This week, in a rare daylight operation, the United States proved that belief wrong. This is the real, fully sourced account of exactly why this island matters so much, exactly what America struck there, and exactly why the timing of this specific attack in broad daylight rather than under cover of darkness carries such significant strategic meaning. Every detail here comes directly from CENTCOM's own confirmed statements and independent expert analysis. Hit like, subscribe if you're new, and let's break this down properly. Let's start with exactly what CENTCOM confirmed about this specific operation. The U.S. military said the 90-minute wave of strikes on Greater Tunb Island further degraded Iran's ability to attack commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That is the official, stated purpose behind this operation, delivered in CENTCOM's own characteristically direct language. This was not a symbolic gesture or a limited probing action. 90 minutes of sustained strikes against a single specific island, targeting coastal defense systems and cruise missile storage facilities, according to the U.S. military's own description of exactly what was hit. Notably, as of the most recent reporting available, neither the Iranian government nor the URG has publicly commented on this specific attack, a silence that itself is worth noting given how quickly Iran has responded publicly to nearly every other American strike throughout this entire conflict. Now let's talk about why this specific island matters so enormously, because understanding Greater Tunb's actual strategic role requires understanding both its geography and its disputed political status, according to expert analysis from Adel Abdelgafar, a Middle East expert and senior resident fellow at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. The island's location alongside the inbound and outbound shipping lane is, in his own words, very strategic. He explained the tactical significance directly. Any military personnel or anti-ship cruise missiles based there are very close and can disrupt shipping and have disrupted shipping because the island is so close to the lane. Read that assessment carefully because it tells you this is not a theoretical or hypothetical concern about the island's potential military value. According to this expert's own direct characterization, weapons systems based on Greater Tunb have already been used to disrupt commercial shipping traffic through the strait, making this island a demonstrated active threat to maritime commerce rather than merely a precautionary target. Let's talk about the island's disputed political status, because this adds a genuinely complex diplomatic layer to what might otherwise appear to be a straightforward military target. Greater Tunb Island was seized by Iran from the United Arab Emirates back in 1971, and it remains a disputed territory to this day, with the way continuing to claim the island rightfully belongs to it rather than to Iran. This detail matters enormously for understanding the broader regional dynamics at play here. The United States is striking a piece of territory whose sovereign ownership itself remains an active point of contention between Iran and a close American Gulf ally, adding a layer of geopolitical sensitivity to an already volatile confrontation, since any American military action against this specific island inevitably intersects with the way's own long-standing territorial claim, regardless of how Washington chooses to frame the operation's stated purpose. Now let's talk about exactly how central this island is to Iran's own strategy for controlling the broader strait, because Iranian officials themselves have been remarkably candid about this in the past. Mohammad Akbarzadeh, deputy political officer of the URG Navy, told Iranian state television back in May that the area Iran uses to control the Strait of Hormuz extends as far as Greater Tunb Island. That is a direct, on-the-record admission from Iran's own military leadership, explicitly identifying this specific island as part of the geographic footprint Iran considers essential to its broader strategy of exercising control over the strait. Separately, Alireza Tangsiri, the previous commander of the naval force of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, who was killed in Israeli attacks back in March, had told local media in 2025 that each of these islands carries immense strategic importance to Iran, specifically for safeguarding the Strait of Hormuz. Let's talk about exactly what kind of military capability Iran has actually based on this island, because this is where the strategic picture becomes considerably more detailed and specific. According to expert analysis cited in this reporting, a lot of these islands host key Iranian military capabilities, including radar systems that allow Iran to detect ships, especially vessels attempting to transit the strait while going dark, meaning without broadcasting their location through standard tracking systems. Beyond radar detection capability, these islands also host command and control systems specifically designed to coordinate among Iran's dispersed URG forces, spread across the broader island chain. Taken together, these capabilities allow Iran genuine operational control of the strait, making it considerably easier for the Revolutionary Guard Corps to actually locate, track, and ultimately attack vessels transiting through this critical waterway. This is precisely why American military planners identified Greater Tunb specifically as a priority target. It functions as a working part of the detection and coordination infrastructure Iran depends on to execute exactly the kind of maritime attacks that have plagued commercial shipping throughout this entire war. Now let's talk about the physical scale of this island, because understanding its actual size helps put the fortification level in proper context. According to reporting from SBS News, Greater Tunb is approximately 3 times the size of Sydney's central business district, a genuinely substantial landmass for a facility of this kind, providing ample physical space for the kind of dispersed, hardened military infrastructure that analysts describe. Because of its size specifically, expert analysis has described Greater Tunb as one of the more heavily fortified of Iran's strategic islands, with both Greater Tunb and its smaller neighboring counterpart, Lesser Tunb, functioning as established military outposts for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. For years, media reporting has confirmed that the IRG and the Iranian army maintain an active military presence on this island, though specific operational details about exactly what equipment and personnel are stationed there have never been made publicly available, adding to the sense that this island has functioned, up until this week's strikes, as a genuinely secure and largely opaque piece of Iranian military infrastructure. Let's talk about exactly why the daytime timing of this specific operation matters so much, because this represents a genuine and deliberate departure from the established pattern that has defined nearly every prior strike throughout this entire war. According to reporting on this specific operation, CENTCOM's 90-minute assault on Greater Tunb marked an unusual departure from the predominantly nighttime attacks that have characterized this conflict up to this point. Analysts have specifically characterized this rare daytime assault as underscoring Washington's growing military confidence and as signaling an intensifying campaign specifically aimed at degrading Iran's coastal military capabilities. Think about what conducting a daytime strike actually requires operationally compared to a nighttime one. Daylight strips away the concealment advantages that darkness typically provides to attacking aircraft, meaning American forces choosing to strike in broad daylight anyway sends a deliberate signal that Iran's air defense and detection capability in this specific region has been degraded to the point where the traditional tactical advantage of nighttime cover is no longer considered strictly necessary to execute this kind of mission successfully. Now let's connect this specific strike to the broader campaign happening simultaneously across Iran's entire southern coastline, because Greater Tunb was not struck in isolation from everything else happening in this war during this exact same window. This operation formed part of a wider campaign against Iranian missile, drone, and naval assets spread across the country's southern coastline. Beyond Greater Tunb specifically, other islands, including Qeshm, Hengam, and Kish, were also targeted by American strikes during this same broader campaign. This tells you that Greater Tunb represents one specific node within a considerably larger, coordinated effort to systematically dismantle the entire network of island-based military infrastructure Iran has spent years building specifically to project control over the Strait of Hormuz, rather than representing an isolated, standalone target selected in a vacuum. Let's talk about the timing of this strike relative to the broader collapse of diplomacy in this conflict, because Greater Tunb's targeting connects directly to the same broader breakdown that has driven every other recent escalation throughout this specific phase of the war. The war in the Middle East has escalated into this new phase, specifically since the fragile ceasefire and memorandum of understanding between the two countries broke down, following attacks on commercial targets attempting to pass through the strait. As part of that now collapsed memorandum, Iran had specifically agreed to provide what was described as safe passage for ships attempting to transit the Strait of Hormuz, an international waterway through which approximately a fifth of the entire world's oil supply passes. The collapse of that specific safe passage commitment is directly connected to why American forces have now expanded their targeting to include island-based infrastructure like Greater Tunb, specifically addressing exactly the kind of coastal and island-based military assets that would otherwise allow Iran to continue threatening shipping even absent a formal, declared blockade or war footing. Let's talk about the reimposed naval blockade specifically, because this strike on Greater Tunb occurred directly alongside that same enforcement effort, reinforcing just how integrated these two separate strategies, the blockade and the coastal strikes, actually are as part of a single, unified American campaign. The operation on Greater Tunb came as the United States reimposed a naval blockade on Iran under the direct order of President Trump, with CENTCOM confirming that American forces had redirected to commercial vessels attempting to breach the blockade within hours of its reimplementation, while asserting that U.S. forces remained on station to continue enforcing it. This is worth understanding as a single, coordinated strategic package rather than as separate, unrelated stories happening to occur around the same time. The blockade enforces economic pressure by directly interdicting vessels attempting to reach or leave Iranian ports. The strikes against island infrastructure like Greater Tunb simultaneously degrade the specific detection and strike capabilities Iran would otherwise use to threaten and interfere with vessels attempting to comply with or navigate around that same blockade. Together, these two efforts reinforce each other directly, each one making the other considerably more effective than either would be operating alone. Now let's talk about the broader question analysts have specifically raised regarding what comes next for Greater Tunb and islands like it, because this story extends beyond the strikes that have already happened into genuine uncertainty about future American intentions. Some analysis covering this specific escalation has specifically pose the question of whether the United States might be planning something considerably more significant than airstrikes alone regarding Iran's so-called Forbidden Island, raising the possibility of an eventual attempt to actually seize or occupy this territory rather than simply continuing to strike it from the air repeatedly. While no confirmed decision or operational plan toward that kind of ground seizure has been publicly announced or verified through official government sourcing, the mere fact that credible defense analysts are actively raising this specific question tells you something important about how seriously the strategic value of this particular island is currently being weighed within the broader trajectory of this conflict. Let's talk honestly about what remains genuinely uncertain in this story, because an accurate account requires acknowledging the limits of what has actually been confirmed versus what remains speculation or analysis. Iran's own government and its Revolutionary Guard Corps have not publicly commented on this specific strike as of the most recent available reporting, a silence that stands in notable contrast to Iran's typically rapid and detailed public responses to nearly every other American strike throughout this war. Whether this silence reflects a genuine strategic recalculation on Tehran's part, an attempt to avoid drawing further attention to a site whose actual defensive capability may have been more significantly degraded than Iran wishes to publicly acknowledge, or simply a delay in official messaging that may still be forthcoming, cannot be determined with confidence based on what has been confirmed so far. Similarly, the specific details of exactly what military equipment and personnel were present on the island at the time of the strike, and the actual extent of damage inflicted, have not been independently verified through satellite imagery analysis or third-party confirmation beyond CENTCOM's own official statement describing the operation's stated objectives and general target categories. So where does this actually leave things as of right now? Greater Tunb Island, seized by Iran from the United Arab Emirates back in 1971 and remaining disputed territory ever since, has become the newest flashpoint in this rapidly escalating conflict, struck for 90 minutes in a rare daylight operation specifically targeting its coastal defense systems and cruise missile storage facilities. Iran's own military officials have previously and explicitly identified this island as central to the country's broader strategy for controlling the Strait of Hormuz, hosting radar detection systems and command coordination infrastructure that allow the URG to track and threaten commercial shipping transiting this critical waterway. The strike occurred as part of a broader campaign targeting multiple additional islands, including Qeshm, Hengam, and Kish, and unfolded directly alongside the reimposed American naval blockade against Iranian ports, to coordinated pressure mechanisms working directly together rather than as separate, unrelated efforts. Iran itself has offered no public comment on this specific strike as of now, a silence that stands out given the country's typically rapid public responses to American military action throughout this entire war. That is the complete, accurate account of exactly why this small, previously obscure island suddenly became such a significant flashpoint in this conflict, and exactly what America's rare daylight strike against it actually accomplished and represented strategically, if this gave you the real, fully sourced picture of exactly why Greater Tunb Island matters so much and exactly what this specific daylight operation signals about the broader trajectory of this war. Drop a comment telling me whether you think this becomes the first step toward an actual American attempt to seize the island outright, or whether continued airstrikes alone prove sufficient to neutralize its strategic value to Iran. And if you want to keep getting the accurate sourced account of exactly how this develops, make sure you're subscribed, because whatever Iran or CENTCOM confirms next, you're going to hear it here first.